And I can share my screen, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead whenever you're ready.
Uh,
So while Tommy's sharing his screen, just want to introduce him. I've known Tommy for it's been over a decade at this point. Um, he's been doing 1031 exchanges for as long as I've known him. And now he's expanded his portfolio and broadened his horizons and not just running a really successful 1031 exchange company, but also doing a lot of development, a lot of syndicated deals here in San Diego and abroad, right? I think he got a couple Utah deals going as well. Um, so he's a great local resource for all of us. If anybody ever has any questions, he'll give you guys his phone number, but if anybody needs it, obviously you can reach out to me. Um, and yeah, I mean, Tommy, thank you so much for taking your Monday morning and being here with us and helping helping enlighten all of us a little bit more.
yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. So can you guys see that? Everything was good?
Yep.
Okay. Well, yeah, I appreciate it, and always good to work with you. I'm glad we're actually working on a deal together right now, which is pretty exciting. So it's been great
It's
to get
super
you
cool.
involved in some of the development stuff that we've been working on. This presentation is, we're going to dig in a little bit to what a 1031 exchange is. I think some of you have heard my presentation before. Um, we'll still get into some of the details of what a 1031 exchange is, but also to share with you some of the new exciting things that we're doing to try to help our agents and brokers, get through this market. The market's been tough, inventory's been low, and we've tried to come up with some creative ways to help our agents actually start to move deals and get deal flow going so that we can all participate in some more profits. So, my name's Tommy Hinson. I'm the founder and owner of Investors 1031 Exchange. Been doing this about 20 years now. Been involved in everything from title and escrow to mortgage to now the 1031 exchange companies. Own a couple development companies that I do as well. So really highly focused on investment real estate for the most part. So getting into the 1031 exchange, a 1031 exchange is actually an IRS code. It's IRC 1031. And what that does is allows an investor who's selling an appreciated real estate investment property to defer paying those taxes. We'll get into a little bit about how much capital gains taxes are, but once you see that, you'll see why it's important. It's important to know that it's tax deferred, not tax exempt, but ultimately those taxes will never get paid. If we can show you how that's going to work. This code only works for investment property or property used in a business. Primary residents don't qualify for a 1031 exchange. That's a 121 exclusion, which gives you the $250,000 tax-free per taxpayer. So if you're married filing jointly on your primary residence, you actually get up to $500,000 tax-free. This is different. This is for your investment properties or properties used in a business only. The nice thing is you must replace the asset with an asset of equal or greater value. So what it means is I'm going to sell an investment property. I'm going to take all that money, buy another investment property that's equal or greater value. So for brokers and agents, it's a great tool. It gives you the ability to not only help an investor sell a property, but now they got to go out and find another property, which can give you the opportunity to double end, that investment for that client. Let's see, there we go. There's several different types of exchanges. The main one that we want to talk about today is the forward exchange. All that means is we're going to sell a property. We're going to have a certain amount of time to buy another property, and that's just your forward exchange. It's important to know that there is a reverse exchange. We do have a lot of clients that are worried about some of the timelines associated with the 1031 exchange. And so they want to go out and buy the property first and then have a certain amount of time to sell the property that they want to sell and pay themselves back or pay off the loan that they used to acquire that property. Then there's the build to suit or improvement exchange. Remember when I said that you have to buy an asset of equal or greater value? This comes up if I'm going to sell $1 million property. Maybe I want to buy an $800,000 property and use $200,000 to improve that property. So that's a build to suit. So there's ways to work that into the equation. We could do a whole seminar on reverse and build to suit exchanges. They're, a little bit more complicated. But just for today's purposes, those do exist. If a client comes to you and says, wait, I already have the property I'm going to buy. It's going to close before the one I sell. Can I still do an exchange? Yes, we can set it up as reverse. And again, if I want to buy something of less value, but use some of the money to do renovations, can we do that? The answer is yes. So the timeline in order to do a 1031 exchange, you have 180 days. So from the moment that you close on what we call the relinquished property, it's the property you're selling, the day that escrow closes is the day that clock starts. So you have 180 days to use those funds and acquire another property. The only issue, which happens to be coming up, is around October 17th. The rule is it's 180 days or when you file your taxes. So if you look at October 17th, that pretty much gets you to that April 20th deadline to file your taxes, or April 15th, I guess it is. So not a big deal. What we do in that situation is actually just have you extend your taxes. So, we'll just, if you're in that situation, you can't find what you want to buy quick enough, you're not going to be able to close within that 180 days, you file an extension. Now you have till September, not a big deal. So we can work with you on that. But generally speaking, you have 180 days from the day you close escrow to acquire the new property. Now, in that first 45 days, you have to identify what it is that you want to acquire. We call that the identification period. And what that means is you're going to fill out a sheet of paper that can have up to 3 properties on it. We'll get into this on the next slide, but you have to identify in the first 45 days what your options are going to be, but ultimately you have 180 days to close. So here's the 45-day identification. So again, it starts the day you close on the relinquished property. It's calendar days, and there's 3 ways to identify. The main one is the 3 property rule. That's where you're going to give me a sheet of paper that's going to have 3 different properties on it. These are my 3 choices. The second one is the 200% or fair market value rule. That's where you give me a sheet of paper. You can identify up to 200% of what you sold. So if I sold a property for $1 million, I can actually go out and identify as many properties as I want, up to $2 million worth of value. The last one's the 95% exception. That's where you give me a sheet of paper. You can give me as many properties as you want, any value that you want, but you have to acquire 95% of what you identify. So that's going to come into play whenever you have portfolios. You're buying large portfolios of properties. It's going to be more than 3 properties. It's going to be more than 200% of what we sold. So then we'll dial into that 95% exception. But for the most part, most of you will be dealing with the 3 property rule. Go out, find 3 different options, determine what you want, fill out the sheet of paper, get it in the mail before that 45th day.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be realistic too. That 45 days goes by like a blink of an eye.
It does.
Right.
Yep.
And you're isolated to what's on the market at that given time. So it's really important, from a realtor standpoint, to be able to implement some of these strategies to help their clients out right? When you're negotiating that transaction to sell the original one.
Yep, absolutely. And that's where we come in as an accommodator that's a lot different than your standard accommodators or qualified intermediaries, as they call us. We will work with our clients, as we have with Ed, to help them find, these different options. So obviously, we want you as the agents to go out and be able to find that second property, double in that commission, earn all of that. But we can also help find those opportunities for you. And the opportunities that we find, we make sure that you're still being paid. So, we get thousands of deals sent to us, and so we're constantly looking at different opportunities, and I'll kind of get into some of the things that we're doing on that. Um, but yeah, so what you can do to get around the 45 days, delay your closing date, which none of us want to do. Start looking for property early. That makes a lot of common sense. And then what we really focus on is the TIC and the DST, and what those are fractional ownership interest in large real estate developments, or projects. So we can help isolate, those sponsors that are good at those things. We've got deals on our own, that we can help those clients look at and make sure that no matter what, there is an opportunity for them to invest in something. Like we always say, our clients are only going to pay taxes if they want to pay taxes. We will find something to get them into.
Well, and also, not necessarily delaying the closing, but structuring it in such a way that the clock starts ticking once that replacement property has been found, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
you can essentially push that escrow back. It makes it a little bit more complicated from a financial standpoint. If someone's doing the mortgage, you don't know how long to lock a rate in for. Do you lock it in for 30, 60, 90 days, right?
Mhm.
Give them a little bit more flexibility. And then the other party's got to be flexible as well. However, it is something that, obviously, if you're doing a primary residence, a lot of people will do that. They'll say, I'm not going to start the clock ticking on our escrow with your contingency periods until we find a replacement property and we're in escrow, right? So you could do the same thing with an investment property. I think it's really important because, especially nowadays, the numbers not really working out. I mean, look at, I just went through this. I'm in the middle of it right now with Tommy. I mean, I couldn't find a property in San Diego, or Big Bear, or, even going into Riverside that didn't require a significant amount of work, right? And that cash flowed. And that was a good exchange. But the way that Tommy and his team are doing it is night and day, by creating these, taking advantage of ADUs, the new regulations that are involved. I'm going to let him get into that, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware, like, there are strategies that you can implement to help your clients kind of through that initial 45-day period, because it goes by in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and we definitely have some strategies to help with all of that. We always say, let's try to find something in 45 days. It's good for you, the brokers and the agents. But if we do get in a situation where it can't be found, then that's where we'll jump in and ensure that your clients don't pay those taxes. So the qualified use requirement, I think we kind of hit on this, that you must have the intent to hold both the relinquished and replacement properties for rental/income production, investment, or use in a business. So the big issue that comes up is, how long do I have to hold this property before it qualifies? There's no time period. It's intent. So if I buy a property, my intent is to hold this property for investment. It's not to flip it. It's not to develop it and sell it. The intent has to be to hold it for investment. Now, doesn't mean that you have to rent it out. You can get raw vacant land that has no rental income. That's really not what the key is. The key is that it's not your primary, is really what they're looking for. And your goal is to not develop and sell it. So when we go into these things, really focus on your intent must be this. Now, 2 years is what you see a lot online. 2 years is kind of that safe haven where we've seen people that do hold properties for 2 years, which means two tax returns are filed, their audit risk goes down dramatically. So, if they do say ultimately I want to move into the property, we stop and say, no, you don't. You're never going to move into the property. This is only going to be for investment, wink, wink. But, after you file two tax returns, maybe you can, consider moving into that property. But the IRS and the FTV, what they're looking for here is that your intent was always to move into it or was always to flip it and sell it for profit. So that's where it says property held for sale will typically not qualify. That's your properties acquired to fix and flip, condo conversions, and properties acquired to develop. So, obviously development could be a 1031 exchange, but those are developments that you're going to buy the land, increase the value, build what you want to build on it, and then hold on to that for investment property. So, those are things that we are able to work on for you. The reinvestment requirement is the investor must have the intent to reinvest in a like-kind replacement property. We'll get into that. I hate that term. Like-kind can be anything that's real estate related. Investor must trade up in equal or greater value. So if I sell a property for $1 million, I've got to go buy another property for $1 million. You must reinvest all the cash that you make in order to not pay taxes. Now, if you do want to take cash out, that's fine. We call that boot. So you can actually take cash out of your exchange and just pay tax on that portion that you take out, but it would be taxable. An investor can always add cash, but cannot withdraw cash without paying tax. So that's important to know. Again, you can take out cash, pay tax on it. If you want to buy something even greater than what you have, you can always add cash and buy something more expensive. These are like-kind properties, and this is why the term kind of doesn't make sense, but these are all the things that you can exchange into. You can sell a single-family home, you can buy multifamily, commercial, office, retail, industrial, vacant land, even oil and gas interest and mineral interest, which can get a little complicated, and 30-year leases. So we have a lot of people that are buying ground leases. As long as those leases have 30 years or more on them, they actually qualify as real estate and like-kind property. Then the other thing that we've kind of hit on briefly is the TIC and the DST. Those are the things we're seeing a lot of right now. Those are your tenant in common and your Delaware statutory trust, and those are fractional ownership interest in properties. People are really like those right now, especially considering the debt markets, because what happens is if I sell a property for $1 million and I got to go buy a property for $1 million, but let's say when I sold my property, I only had $500,000 in cash that came out of it because I had to pay off a $500,000 loan. What happens is I can take that $500,000 in cash, invest it in one of these passive, real estate investments, and actually get credit for the loan that's already on that property. So if I invest in a property that has a 50% loan on it, and I come in with $500,000, I'm actually going to get credit for $1 million purchase. So therefore, I qualify for the equal or greater value. Remember, if I sold for $1 million, I got to buy for $1 million. Well, I don't have the ability to go get a loan. Maybe my credit's off right now. Maybe the interest rates are too high for me. Well, now I can roll it into one of these investments that already has debt. I can get qualified, or I can get allocated debt from them. Don't have to qualify. It's non-recourse to me. We call it off-balance sheet debt. So one of the great things about those fractional ownership deals is you can get credit for other people's debt and not have to even qualify or put it under your own credit. These things are passive. So this is basically, I'm going to go out and buy, here's an example where right now we're acquiring a $56 million 280 unit apartment complex in Fort Myers, Florida. So what we'll do is we'll go get the loan, we'll put the whole deal together, and then we'll allow people to 1031 exchange into that property. And as little as $300 I mean, I think that one's going to be more like $500,000 increments, but you could 1031 exchange into that, be a part owner of that property, get credit for the debt that's on it, get your portion of the rents that come in, and then once that thing gets renovated and goes back on the market to sell, you can set up your exchange and exchange back out and go back into the market, buy traditional real estate, do whatever you want with it. But those are the opportunities, that we look at. So we call them syndications, but the formats that are used are the tenant in common and the Delaware statutory trust. These are your non-like-kind properties. Again, we talked about primary residence. You cannot 1031 exchange your primary residence. That's where people will, really get themselves in trouble. They try to 1031 exchange that situation. The way you could 1031 exchange your primary residence is only live in it 2 out of the previous 5 years. If you were able to live in it 2 of the previous 5 years, you could 1031 exchange it and qualify for that $500,000 in tax-free money. So that's something we could go into, on a different presentation. But just so you know, as long as you've only lived in it 2 of the previous 5 years, you could still qualify, for a 1031.
So let me ask you a question. What about doing a partial 1031 exchange? Say you have a 2,000 square foot home primary in the front, and then you have 1,000 square foot ADU in the back. 1/3 of the property being sold as investment. Wouldn't you be able to do a partial 1031 exchange or something like that?
In that case, it's tough still because if it's one parcel, and you've been filing your tax return, as your primary residence in general. But yes, if you're filing a tax return and you're showing that back portion,
Being rented out.
being a rental, and, generally you're going to want a second address on that. In California, it's tough. That's where they've been popping people, trying to, get people to do, those partial exchanges. But they are definitely doable. That's where you want to call me and I can kind of walk through and see how you've been doing your taxes, what kind of rents you've been collecting, how the whole property is set up. But it's definitely doable. We just have to work through some of the kinks on that. But definitely doable.
Well,
So other things that aren't qualified, obviously cash, stocks and bonds, mutual funds, REITs, partnerships. The big one here is partnerships. People want to sell a property and then buy, partnership interest into a property that already exists. Remember, you have to be on title, so you can't buy interest in a company that owns real estate. You have to buy the actual real estate, so that can get a little complicated as well. So one thing I can say, that if anybody gets anything out of this presentation, is do not own your properties in partnerships. Own them in tenant in commons. We have so many situations where a partnership, 3 guys get together, they go buy a property, they start a company, they get an LLC, they call it, Tommy and Eddie's LLC. We go buy a property, then we go to sell the property. I want to do a 1031 exchange. Ed wants to cash out. He can't. The way the IRS looks at it is the partnership owns the property, we own the partnership. And so whatever taxpaying entity sells the property has to be the taxpaying entity that acquires the next property. And so that partnership is stuck and there's no way for us to separate and go our separate ways. So it's very important that we love LLCs, own your property in an LLC, but make sure that Tommy's LLC is a tenant in common and owns 50% interest, with Ed's LLC, which owns 50% interest as a tenant in common. And so that way you have separate tax-paying entities. When we go to sell that property, we can go our separate ways. We can continue going down the road together if we want. But it's real important to make sure that you don't use partnerships when acquiring these properties. So this is how taxes impact real estate investments. And this is, a big one. We won't go super deep into this, but The reason I bring it up is I have so many clients that call me and say, I'm just going to pay the tax. It's 15%. Um, that's just your federal tax rates. And sometimes that can go as high as 20%. Then what you have is the healthcare reform tax rate. So that's any investor that makes over $250,000 in passive income is going to qualify for the 3.8%. So most of the time in California, when somebody's selling an investment property, you're going to exceed that number. So there's another 3.8%. Then you have the state of California, which can be as high as 13.3% based on your income levels. So the average on that's probably about 9.3%, although we're seeing that number hit 10, pretty consistently. And then you have depreciation recapture, which no one really understands. That is why I hold an investment property. I'm depreciating the property every year. If I don't do a 1031 exchange and I go to sell that property, the IRS wants 25% of what I depreciated back. So you get some of these clients who've owned these properties for, 10 years, 20 years. They've fully depreciated the properties out. They get, surprised when it's like my CPA only said it was going to be 15%. Now I'm paying up to 30 to 40% of what I made on my real estate in taxes. And so here's a case study that shows how that looks. I have a client who bought a property for $500,000, held it for 10 years, and sold it for $1 million. Pretty standard stuff that we see in California and San Diego, especially. So I made $500,000 on the sale of this property, but I have 20% in federal taxes. So boom, there's 100,000 that's going to be taken from me. Then I have Medicare tax. I exceeded that 250,000, so there's another 19,000 that's going to be reduced. Then California, we're looking at 10.3% based on that gain. There's 51,500. So that $500,000 I made is now down to $329,500. But since I've held the property for 10 years, I've actually depreciated $185,185 in depreciation over that 10-year period. Well, here comes depreciation recapture. That's $46,296 that has to be paid back in depreciation recapture. So now the $500,000 that I made off of this sell, I only end up walking away with $283,204, which is obviously a 44% reduction in what I should have been making. So when somebody tells you I might just pay the tax, it's only 20%, you need to remind them there's all these other taxes. And by the way, I have to remind CPAs about this too. They just think of it as the 20% capital gains tax. When you take into the rest of these numbers into account, it can be catastrophic for your investor. When your investor finds out about a 1031 exchange after the fact, they're not going to be a huge fan of yours if they find out that there was a way to not pay all these taxes. Here's why it's important. Let's go with the guy who didn't know about the 1031 exchange, sold the property, going to go buy another investment property, going to go to Ed, get a loan at a 50%. He's got 283,000, so he goes and gets a loan for 283. So now he's going to buy a $566,000 property. Let's just assume that his gross scheduled income on that property is about 10% after all fees and mortgages. So now this client's going to make $56,000 a year on his new rental property that he acquired. Now, had he known about the 1031 exchange, he would have had all $500,000 of that money to go reinvest. He could go get that same loan at 50%. So now he's buying $1 million property instead of a $566,000 property. Same gross scheduled income at 10%. Now he's making $100,000 a year in rental income. And so obviously that's a huge difference. So what would happen with your client is they're going to come to you and go, because you didn't tell me about a 1031 exchange, I'm actually making $43,000 less a year in rental income. So it's very important that they're aware of it. It's very important that they know it's not just 20%. It's, a massive amount of money. Depending on the election, we've heard that these capital gain taxes can maybe even go up into the 40s instead of the 20s. Um, so not telling you which way to vote on that, but you got to be careful with that. But it's very important to know that if anybody is selling a property that's not their primary residence, the first thing you should think about is this going to be a 1031 exchange? Let's make sure that we advise the client of the savings of doing that and how much money they'll have to give away if they don't understand that.
And at the very least, having a conversation,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason why you can't raise your hand and say, "Hey, I've got someone for you," just to at least talk to and explore all of your options, and don't leave anything on the table out there.
Yep, yep, exactly. And I'm happy to get on the phone with your clients, talk to them. I tell them at the bare minimum, open your exchange gives you at least 45 days while you're doing your identification to determine whether you want to or not. And maybe you don't want to do an exchange. Maybe you do want to cash out and pay the tax. But what happens during that 45 days when you find another property that makes really good sense and you can avoid all those taxes? If you decide never mind, I want to go ahead and cash out on that 45th day. Your money's released back to you anyway, so no harm, no foul. Um, the big problem, obviously, that we've all been facing is the low inventory market. And so, with this 45-day window, it can move fast, just like Ed said. It happens very quickly. That's our job, is we really help our clients through that process. We have what we call a deal room now. And so what we are allowing our clients to do, if you have a property that is a good investment property, you can get that to us. You fill out a form. We're going to put that property on our website. We have a database of over 25,000 real estate investors. You're going to make our mailer. So we're going to constantly be putting these deals in front of our clients for you guys. We kind of look at it kind of like a stock market. We've got sellers that are selling, we've got buyers that are buying. And if somehow we can bridge that gap, then we can help our clients get through this exchange period. So let us know if you've got properties you're trying to move. You'll be getting in touch with us. All we want to be is your accommodator. If one of our clients wants to buy your property, we're not looking for some sort of commission. We're going to simply give them your cell phone number and say, hey, this is whose deal this is. Get on the phone with them. Hopefully you guys can make a deal, and in the process we get an exchange out of it. So that's coming very soon. The landing page is almost done, but that's one of the added values you're going to get from us. You're never going to get that from any of the other accommodators. They don't want to be in that game. They just want to be your accommodator. For us, we know if we can get your real estate moved, then we can create an exchange and make everyone happy. Advise different, be different. My colleague came up with that phrase, and I really do like it. The big thing about us that's different is we're not affiliated with a title company or an escrow company. Those larger QIs, IPX, First American, they're specifically taught not to advise. So if their clients call and say, well, what if I lived in the property and did this? Or what if, like Ed said, what if I have an ADU that I'm renting out and I have to do this? They'll simply tell you, go talk to your CPA. We're not allowed to discuss any of that. We are 100% willing to advise. I do several calls with people's attorneys and CPAs and financial advisors. I'm in the mix. I want people to make the right decision when it comes to investment real estate. And I have no problem, advising. You guys should definitely be careful doing that. It is tax code. You don't want to say the wrong things. But if you can just get me on the phone with them or anyone on my team, we will make them comfortable. We'll show them the gray areas. We'll show them the red flags, things that they're trying to do that can get them in trouble. But that's what's really different about us compared to our counterparts or our competition. The other big thing, obviously, as we've hit on a little bit, is that we get so many investments handed to us. People know that if you're an accommodator, You've got investors that are sitting in cash that have to spend that money in a certain amount of time. So we get thousands of deals across our inbox. We actually have a team of analysts that read through these deals, determine who these principals are, good ones, bad ones, ones that we don't have any interest in. Ones that we do, they make the cut. We get those in our deal room and give all of you an opportunity to look at those deals. Again, we're never going to put a deal in the deal room where it's going to take commission from you. We do not earn commission on any of these deals. These are for sharing for agents to be able to share back and forth. Our goal is to get deals moved, and that's how we all get exchanges. So you're going to have plenty of opportunity to see a bunch of new stuff with us. These are some quick examples of deals that we have put in front of our clients that have been really, really nice returns. This is a 320 unit apartment complex we've done in American Fork, Utah. This one pays 12% priority returns in quarterly distributions. The actual rate of return, once it's completed and fully stabilized, would be about 21% per year, meaning that your client would make 2.3x their money. So on a $100,000 investment, your client would get back their money plus $130,000. So great example of that. Chalcedony, which Ed knows quite a bit about. This is 126 units that one of my companies is actually going to be building in Pacific Beach. That one's going to be about a 28% return on investment per year. So that one should be breaking ground here, fairly soon. This is one that's actually on the market right now. We finished this one a couple months ago. 4674 Firestone in Claremont. We took a single family home, added 12 units in the backyard. As you can see, we did common space, really nice finishes. This one's fully leased up now and on the market for 5.2. So we're going to sell it for 5.2 million. So this would be an opportunity for an investor to come in, buy the finished product. But we also have the ability to have investors come in and invest in the actual development of it. So this one's going to have a projected IRR of 80%, which is pretty much off the charts. But those are some of the opportunities that we have right now. Last thing that we'll throw in here is our buy box. So SDRE, which is one of the companies that I own with my partner Christian Spicer, we just got a large investment from an institutional group called Fortress. They're offering to give us $1 billion to go out and buy more real estate in San Diego to build what you just saw, such as Firestone. And so this is what we call our buy box. Anything that you see on this list right here is what we're looking for to acquire. And if you can bring us, a 9,000 square foot, lot or larger in the Linda Vista, Claremont area, we're just looking for multifamily or single family. We don't want to do any sort of zone changes or variances. These are the areas we're looking. We don't like coastal, so we don't want to be in the coastal area. The coastal commission just takes too long to approve our plans. So really, we're looking for stuff in San Diego that's not the coastal commission. We can get these plans done really quick and build similar product to what you just saw on Chalcedony and that Firestone property. So if you do have opportunities that are like this, you can reach out to me directly. I'll connect you with our head of acquisitions. We can tell you now, if you bring us a piece of property and we acquire it and we build it, you will absolutely get an opportunity to help list that property and sell it for us once we're done with it. That's kind of what we do. But depending on the size, if it's if it's over 15 units, a lot of times we got to bring in the commercial guys that have those buyers. But this is a great opportunity for you that are out trying to move real estate right now, to really look at these types of opportunities. If you can find anything that fits this buy box, I can guarantee that you'll have a buyer, which would be us on it. So, keep your eyes out for that type of stuff.
Hey, Tommy, we did have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Tommy's contact information, Yan. But she was wondering, when should they contact you in the
When doing a
process?
1031 exchange?
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as you get an escrow. So if you want to have a conversation prior to getting an escrow with you and your client, I can, be happy to do that, walk them through what the whole situation is going to be. But you won't need me until you're in escrow on your relinquished property. So as soon as that property goes into escrow, that's when you're going to want to get in touch with me. We have to do some paperwork and get that over to escrow. And what we don't want is escrow to do all their paperwork and then for you to tell them, oh, it's going to be a 1031 exchange. That means they have to actually redo some of their paperwork. So second you get an escrow is when you're going to need me.
So if you're a real estate agent on this call and you have a client that has an investment property they're trying to sell, they're thinking about selling, one of the first things I would do if I were you, is to at least have some dialogue with someone on Tommy's team, Tommy or somebody on his team, to really discuss all the options, right? So don't wait for the very last second to be doing that. Get ahead of it and give them that good advice. You're only going to add value by setting yourself apart and kind of pointing them in the right direction right from the get-go. Also, another question was, what do you charge? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually only charge $495 to do our exchanges now. You're going to see most people will charge, up to 1,000. We, came in and when rates went up, so we really make our money on the float while we're holding the funds. So when rates went up, we're one of the only companies that actually dropped our fees. So when rates were down, we all raised our fees because we weren't making any money on the float. But when rates went up, we dropped our fees. Took a lot of clout from our competitors asking what we were trying to do. And what we're trying to do is just make it fair. So our fee is $495 to complete a forward exchange.
And then how deep into PB would be considered non-coastal? Is that a few blocks or East PB?
I believe it's 2 miles. I think
Well,
2 miles. I'd have to go look on that, but like I think if you look right around that 2 mile mark, and it kind of goes in and out. It's not a straight line. So normally, if you find a property, you can go on to any of the websites and see whether it's in the coastal or not. But otherwise, just send it to me. I'm happy to look at it and let you know if it is in coastal or not. And it might not be a good fit for us on the development side, but maybe I do know somebody that's flipping there or somebody that wants to go into that. So all those deals, feel free to send them to me. I'll still take a look at them and see, uh, what can be done with them.
If the property is currently in Alabama from a 1031 exchange standpoint, from California, can you help with that?
Yes. Yep. We do all 50 states. As you can see, we've got offices in New York, Michigan. We're in Utah. We're in Southern California, St. George. So we're all over the country, and but we do exchanges everywhere in the country and Guam. Actually, right here from San Diego.
Cool. Great questions, you guys. Yeah, you bet, man. What else, you guys? Have any other questions that Tommy can answer for you while we got them? No, well, like I said, he's personally helping me with my own exchange. He's been, so accessible and really helpful, and his team's been really helpful in sending me any kind of, information that I'm looking for as far as different investment opportunities out there, that he has in his back pocket, and just being really responsive and communicative. I mean, it makes a huge difference when someone like that isn't just ghosting you and just like not getting back to you, and like you have someone on your team, which really, really helps. Tommy's last name is Hinson, Hinson. So if anybody has any further questions, by all means, all of his contact information is right there on the screen. Please take a picture of it. Feel free to reach out to me. I can put you in touch with him as well. But yeah, man, I really appreciate you taking the time coming down uh,
Yep.
Monday
Appreciate the
morning.
time, guys.
Yeah,
Have a
absolutely.
great week.
Thank you so much, my friend.
All
I'll
right.
see you.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.